Good afternoon. Welcome to the BET Budget Committee's July monthly meeting. I am Leslie Tarkington, and we have members Leslie Moriarty, Andy Deuce, and Jeff Raymer with us this afternoon. We are meeting in hybrid virtual Zoom as we have since January 26th. We expect this is the last hybrid meeting, and in September and for the remainder of the year, all meetings will be in traditional format, in person and without personal electronics. As an abundance of caution, all of the Budget Committee meetings will be in the Town Hall meeting room and scheduled during the working day at 1 p.m. We expect that there will be a date adjustment to the October meeting. Again, we thank Jenny Larkin and Horst Tibby for their technical support during these 7 months. The next meeting is scheduled for September 14th. If a primary election should be held on that day, then the meeting will be held the following day, September 15th at 1 p.m., again in the Town Hall meeting room. Committee members are holding 2 dates through August 11th until it is learned if petitions were submitted to the registrar's office. The semi-annual release of conditions report from TAG, Transportation Association of Greenwich, planned for the July meeting, today's meeting, was requested by the town administrator to be deferred until the September meeting. He is personally doing additional due diligence. Ms. Moriarty and I agreed with his suggestion that deferring would be more productive for committee members. We have a full agenda for today's meeting, and so we begin with the Board of Education, and we have Sean O'Keefe with us. And Sean, would you like to proceed and present ED6 and ED7 for today's meeting?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be here. So I have two summer budget transfers, the first of which is ED6, which is the summer transfers related to the Board of Ed operating fund. Before I get into it, just a few words about the year. As we all know, we started the year with a great deal of uncertainty. We started with a known exposure, special ed exposure of $2 million. And we also knew that we'd be incurring a significant amount of COVID-related spending. Both of those items, the BET graciously advised that we'd be covered, so we wouldn't have to worry. As it turns out, we did have a significant amount of federal grants for, to be exact, the ESSER 1 and 2, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, as well as the ARP. That, combined with unanticipated significant amount of COVID-related savings, enabled us to, one, contain the special ed outplaced tuition, and two, we were able to cover all of our COVID-related spending. And then there was additional savings on top of that. So as you'll see on the first color page, we ended the year at 163,143,668, which is a better than budget amount of 316,929. And as you'll see in the transfers column that are colored in 4 different colors, we had a total of total transfer amount of $1,359,481. And you can see that the 300s, which are in supplies, needed to be increased by $1,359,481, and decreases in budget in the 200s, 400s, and 700s, which are services, maintenance, and settlement of claims. On the second color, you can see the details, but I'll summarize it. We had an increase in supplies in the areas of textbooks, custodial equipment, and AV and IT equipment. And those increases were funded by decreases in transportation, where we had a significant amount of COVID-related savings. Just to give you an example of the savings, for 2 of our big breaks, the winter break and the spring break, we followed those breaks with a 1 week of full remote. Each one of those full remote weeks generated savings of about $250,000 each. So just on those 2 remote weeks, generated savings of about $500,000. We also had savings in utilities, both electric and gas, in some various maintenance accounts. And there's a line in our budget called settlement of claims, which is a non-special ed settlement account, which we did not use. So that basically explains. So we had increases in textbooks, custodial equipment, AV and IT equipment, and funded by transportation, utilities, maintenance, and then the settlement of claims. The last page in that package is just the debits and the credits, but I've kind of already addressed it at a higher level. Any questions on the Board of Ed transfers?
Andy, do you have any questions?
Would you like a motion now, or?
I just wanted to thank Sean for sending the additional detail in terms of the object codes. We didn't see this until I guess it was posted yesterday afternoon to the the Board of Education website. And I did send a request for additional information, which he followed through on, so I appreciate that. So Leslie, if you have a motion.
I'll make I know we have a food services one as well, but I think we can act on them independently. So I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal 21 budget transfers for the Board of Education account.
Seconded.
Please state your name.
Oh, I said Leslie Moriarty, so Leslie,
And, sorry, and Jeff Raymer is seconding.
and usually I repeat that anyway. So Jeff seconded it, so that's good. And our vote is, so the vote is unanimous. We won't individually call that. Vote is unanimous. Okay, Sean.
The next item is ED7.
School lunch fund, yes, please.
So ED7 school lunch fund. Basically, it was a transfer between an increase in the services other than personnel and funded by savings in supplies and materials. So essentially, we had an underrun in food cost and supplies, and that facilitated our shift of a budget to cover some transportation costs. That's it.
I have no questions.
No questions?
Andy, no questions? So we have no questions on this.
Appropriate for a motion?
I'm sorry, Leslie. Can I go back to ED6? Did you say whether this was routine or non-routine? When you made your motion? I didn't write that
She did
down.
not.
I believe the
I don't-
budget committee has the authority for Board of Ed transfers. Is that correct? So it does not go to the full BET.
That's right.
Okay, you're right. Thank you. Okay, so now we are doing ED7. Do I have a motion on ED7?
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal 21 budget transfers within the food services.
And Jeff
Fund.
Raymer seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion from Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Jeff Raymer, and those in favor? Okay, once again, this is unanimous, 4-0-0, so I won't call an individual vote on this.
If this is Leslie Moriarty, if I can ask clarification to Mr. Geiger, does the same authority for the budget committee on Board of Ed transfers apply to the food services? Yes? Okay. So it doesn't need to go to the BET. The full board.
Thank you for that clarification. Can I just ask one question of Sean before we move on? Can you give us just any, like a 60-second update on progress at the North Miami School? Is that appropriate? John?
Yeah, I'm hearing that, I haven't been there in a while, but I'm hearing that they're making very good progress. Dan Dan advised me that the other day, so good progress.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to move on. I think we'll be talking with you later, right, Sean?
Yes.
So right now we are going to elevate Fire Chief Joseph McHugh. And so to become a panelist with us. And I see him up here. I did see him up here. And he's still
Elevate Brian Kozak.
I'm sorry.
We also elevate Chief Kozak.
Okay, I didn't see him there before, but I'll look again. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
So we're now being, good afternoon, Joe and Brian. We
Good
welcome
afternoon,
you
Leslie, everybody.
to the Budget Committee meeting. And so you're presenting FD1 for the fire department, some year-end adjustments, budget transfers.
Yes.
Correct.
So this is Chief Kozak speaking. We're looking to transfer from areas of surplus in our budget to salaries to the sum of $259,000 to cover some shortfalls in the salary area. All the shortfalls were due to the continuing impact of the vacancies that we have. We have 8 vacancies due to retirements. It takes about 6 months to get somebody from scratch on board on shift, and we have to cover those vacancies with overtime in the interim. We had a lot of promotions due to the retirements, so that requires training that's required for their position. So there's overtime dollars for that that also need to be allocated for them to do that. And then as far as vacations go, vacations were permitted to be rolled over a certain amount last year into this year. So, I believe we had some excess vacation time that we had to cope with. So we basically went on a spending freeze the last 2 months, and we took all the surplus from that spending freeze and offset the higher costs in the salaries area.
Thank you for that explanation. Ms. Moriarty?
Yes, this is Leslie Moriarty. Just a question. I understand why you needed to make these transfers this year. Does it give you concern about your fiscal 22 budget, or do you not expect the same experience that you had this year going into next?
It does concern us for the next fiscal year. We have approximately 50% of our staff can retire. So we expect to have some vacancies as well coming up, which would impact the overtime budget to fill those vacancies during.
We currently have 2 vacancies right now.
Yeah, and right now we have 2. And then, so I do expect to see some similar situations moving forward.
Okay, we'll all keep our eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Mr. Raymer?
Yeah, this is really just a curiosity question that I'm really directing to Roland. Roland, I'm fine with this item, and I'm fine with how it's been reflected and shown. But if the transfers were just within sub-departments of the fire department, from administration over to firefighting force, but both within salaries, they wouldn't need permission for a transfer within a major object code like that, would they, or would they?
They would not, if it's just coming across. We could have consolidated some of it, but we just kind of grabbed.
No,
all the leftover pieces.
I have no problem with the way it was handled. I just wondered that had there been nothing except transfers within the salary lines, if they could have
They wouldn't be
avoided the visit. But okay, thank you. I'm fine with this. I'll be voting in favor of this.
Do we have any other questions? I'm sorry, Andy, do you have? Okay, so we have no more questions. So do we have a motion?
Yeah, I would move the.
I'm sorry, Leslie, do you have a question?
Sorry, I would move the item and propose that it be routine so that we can avoid the necessity for Joe and Brian to attend the BET meeting.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Raymer.
Andy seconds the motion.
So Andy Duce seconds the motion. And so those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so no roll call vote. That vote is unanimous at 4-0-0. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for your support.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief McHugh.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
Chief Kozak. Thank you, you too. Okay, moving right along, we have finance. We have finance. And where is Pete Minarski gone?
We have Roland.
Oh, we have Roland.
Oh,
Pete's on the screen. Oh, Pete's on the screen.
Oh, Pete's on the screen. Are you, okay, Pete?
Good. Actually, Roland's gonna be, these are the annual transfers that we do each year. Angela Gencarelli, who retired and moved away, does this for us each year on June 30th. And the total is $1,914,189,000. As I stated in the past, when we close out authorizations in the B fund, is not money, it's just you're closing out the authority to bond. These are not closing out the Z fund. So Roland and I will take any questions at this point.
So to Ms. Moriarty.
this is Leslie Moriarty. Since these reflect projects which have been closed out, were we able to get any project closeout forms from the departments on these projects?
I didn't see any. Did you see any, Roland?
Only the one from the library.
All right, can I,
To date, we've only gotten one from Kevin McCarthy at Parad. We haven't gotten any from Board of Ed, Public Works, or Parks and Rec.
what I'd like to do, if I can request that you follow up with those departments to complete those forms and submit them.
So Mr. Minarski or Mr. Geiger, can we just note that for our September agenda, that we expect to receive copies of all these documents? I don't think we're expecting the departments to come to the meetings. We just expect to receive copies of the completed forms. Is that correct, Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Pete, Mr. Minarski, for your report. Mr. Geiger, too. I know it's not been easy with Angela's departure, so thank you for your support here. So do we have a motion? Mr. Deuce?
Yes, Andy Deuce moves that we accept the report.
Leslie Moriarty can second.
Okay, so Mr. Deuce and Ms. Moriarty, those in favor? Aye. So once again, this is a 4-0-0 vote, so I won't call for a roll call on that. So now we are going to move to our table in person. And we have GEMS up. And so we have both our town administrator, Ben Branyan, and we have Tracy Sheetinger up here at the table with us also, our executive director of GEMS, and they're coming for release of conditions for their GEMS station number 4 out on King Street. And so I think you're coming with good news, aren't you?
I believe so. The reason the town administration is presenting this rather than, this is Ben Branyan. The reason the administration is presenting the GEMS release of conditions is the funding is in Capital 440, which is under the control of the Office of the First Selectman, not GEMS. It's not their general fund contribution. So all the entire project is being funded through OFS in partnership with Public Works, Almanelli. We do have good news. The check, the release of conditions as stated is upon confirmation of receipt of the 200,000 from GEMS. We received the check. A copy of that check is in the application. I personally delivered it to Mr. Geiger to make sure we had no issues of getting lost. So we believe the condition has been met to release the 1.410 for the project. And just for background, we put in the new paragraph 52, which was the budget resolution. And just for your own information, we put in the project schedule Only update on the project is it's currently being in the queue for building permit review. That is the most economical process. If there's any changes to the construction plans, we can do those prior to bidding. Then when we bid, we can bid the most complete package. So if any, happy to answer any questions, but I believe it's an order of the 200,000.
Great. And Ms. Chinger, do you have any further comments? Are you,
I do not.
okay, this is good news. This is a public-private partnership. And, you know, I think that this 200,000, we came to the budget committee meeting in February. This was good news given to us that you were going to provide an additional 200,000 in addition to the front end costs and the furniture and fixtures that GEMS is supplying for this particular project. So I think this is good. I will also add, though, that I did talk with Mr. Manelli offline only because we were talking about something else. And he brought up that he was going to be on vacation this week and that Mr. Brannion would be with us. But he also indicated that when the bids came in, that he would just, you know, send a little memo or summary, or maybe you're going to do it, Tracy, just so we know how it came relative to the, you know, project costs. And no formality, there's no need to come back or anything, but just kind of everyone's interested. I think that's the best way to say it. Okay, so do you have any questions?
On a different topic, but I was listening to the radio and I heard Ms. Scheetinger share some incredible news about your certification. So I thought I would ask you to share it here.
Yeah, we are very excited to report that we are received certification from the Commission on Accreditation of Ambulance Services, which is a voluntary national accreditation service. And we received that notification June 30th. So that was 4 years in the making. We're very excited about that. It was a love-hate relationship, but it just fortifies the fact that GEMS has been, and actually on Thursday here, 35 years. And every single one of those 35 years, they've always put their best foot forward, and this just validates that for the citizens, for us. So we're very excited. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it's a great accomplishment. And you sounded like you excelled on the visit as well. They didn't find anything to note. Is that correct?
You are correct. Yes, we
Great.
did receive a perfect score. I didn't know that that was possible. But as everybody says, I'm a little anal retentive, so they didn't expect anything less.
So great news. Mr. Raymer, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Deuce, do you have any questions? No questions. Okay, so do we have a motion to recommend to the full BET the release of conditions for GEMS?
I will make the motion to recommend the release and have it be a routine item.
Okay, so to recommend the release and have it routine. And that's Ms. Moriarty making the motion, and Mr. Raymer, did
Yeah,
I?
Jeff Raymer would gladly second that.
And Jeff Raymer seconded it. And those in favor? So we have a 4-0-0 vote. So we won't have a roll call vote on that. And we thank you both for attending our meeting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ben Brannion says thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so our next one, Ben, do you stay for this one? Our next one is also SE1. It says First Selectman, release of conditions for professional services. I also know that Mr. Deuce has been involved with this. I don't know how it's being presented. Are you presenting it, Mr. Deuce? or-
I thought I'd present it, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I just
But
thought.
Ben, if you could still remain here, that'd be great. This is Andy Deuce. So I'm going to change hats. I've been serving as co-chair of the Nathaniel Witherall RFP number 7568 evaluation committee since it was established late last year. And we're here today requesting approval from the budget committee for approval of up to $8,000 expenditure, or excuse me, release of special conditions on money set aside to help the committee's work this year. And of the 25,000 set aside for that, we're asking for a release of 8,000 to fund what's called a physical needs assessment study that will help us better inform potential counterparties that we might be speaking with in terms of the physical state of the facility there. It's apparently this is called a PCNA study. It's customary in the business, and it's not something that's too extensive, but it's something that counterparties would expect to see. If I may have a question, yes.
Mr. Raymer.
I have some concerns about this item, as I have shared with my colleagues. I thank Mr. Deuce for taking the time to respond to my email expressing the concerns, but it's appropriate, I think, that I express the concerns publicly as well. This item was approved. It was actually an appropriation of $25,000 in the first selectman's budget for the now recently started new year. And it was in fairly rigid language. It said that it was restricted to additional consulting needs for the review of the Nathaniel Witherell proposals. These dollars, it's a very small amount, and that small amount makes it, it gives me a reluctance about my concerns, but I think there's a principle involved here, so I'm going to persist with it. This small amount is not for consulting to analyze and understand the proposals. This is to produce a piece of work which is part of a selling process on encouraging bidders to come forward and bid to purchase or lease, whatever is the case, this facility. So I have a couple of concerns. First of all, I don't think that this request meets the condition that was placed on it. This is not something which meets the restriction for consulting to assist the first selectman in his review of the proposals. It's something else. It's part of a selling process. Secondly, these proposals, I'm told there's 9 of them, these proposals have never been shared with the BET. So we're being asked to release funding on the blind for something which is being kept confidential. I don't like the transparency of that. It could easily be that the committee decides to make its recommendation, the first selectman acts on it and then makes the instruments public. It could easily be that without making them public, without taking those steps, they could be shared in executive session. I believe that that a review of negotiations that lead to a proposed sale or lease of property meets the FOI requirement for executive session. But that isn't happening. We're just not having this information shared with us, and that's a concern. There's also a problem for me that this is dollars that they wish to spend to promote the sale, but no decision has been made that we intend, in fact, to sell or lease this property. That's still a decision which is pending. Speaking in candor, I don't know where the authority or in which various places the authority to sell lies. I'm not sure that it isn't the office of the first selectman, but I don't know that it is, and I certainly don't know that it is the first selectman alone. It troubles me that none of this, to this point, to the best of my knowledge, perhaps I'm mistaken, has been shared or done in cooperation with the Nathaniel Witherell board. It seems odd to me that I've got a committee out there under the first selectman, which is reviewing the sale of the property, which is run by a board of directors, and the board of directors is not involved. I question the appropriateness of that. I think the board of directors needs to be involved. The sequence in which this matter was raised has the result also that the RTM is not being given an opportunity to decide if it wants $8,000 spent on promoting the sale of the property. They were told that this was dollars to be spent analyzing the proposals, and this is not analyzing the proposals, as I've already said a couple of times. So at the point at which there is a decision that's made to make a recommendation to the first selectman, and the first selectman makes a recommendation, at that point we could be reviewing these dollars, but it seems premature to spend money on producing, through the skill of engineers, a PCNA report to promote a sale when we haven't yet figured out whether there's going to be a sale. Next, this property is subject to a restrictive covenant. I'm not privy to these proposals, but it was shared with me, perhaps incorrectly, that these proposals are prospectively looking to a for-profit operation of the facility. If that's true, then that operation would violate a restrictive covenant upon the property. I don't know where conversations are. Maybe there's been no conversations. Maybe there's been very meaningful conversations, but I certainly don't know at this point that we have a path to avoid the limitations of a restrictive covenant. And I don't know that we even at this point have access to all the people who potentially would have the standing to waive the restrictive covenant. It seems odd that I am spending money to promote a sale of a property, which if the information given to me was correct, it's a sale which would violate a restrictive covenant that the town freely entered into. And that's not appropriate behavior of an august municipality like the town of Greenwich to be conducting its affairs. Lastly, although it's been very hard to discern what's going on at Nathaniel Witherell through COVID, because COVID so desperately challenged the census of beds at COVID. And then, of course, there was large funding from state and federal government flowing in. It is very hard to decipher from all that exactly how the facility is doing now under new management. But I did have the hope, maybe it's a faint hope and I'm going to be disappointed, but I did have the hope that this new management seemed to be doing considerably better. I'm not sure that the facility would be operating at a profit. I don't mean to suggest that, but I did harbor the hope that the facility could be operating under its present management at materially smaller loss than it was doing in the past. And if that's the case, I'm not sure where various people would be on the decision of whether or not to run this gauntlet of a sale or a lease of the property. This facility has, after all, been performing the social service of providing a long-term aged care for our frail elderly of modest financial means. It's not an unimportant social service need, which we very likely would be stepping away from if this property were leased or sold to a for-profit nursing home operator. And so for those reasons, I'm not really in a position, I'm only one vote if the matter comes before the BET at all, but I'm not sure that I would be a supporting vote to sell or lease this property now until I knew how financial management was doing. If financial management, frankly, has not been able to solve the problems, maybe a year and a half from now, I would be enthusiastically in the same place as some of my colleagues are. But for right now, I'm not there yet. And so for those various reasons, I'm sorry to talk for so long, but for those various reasons, I will not be voting in favor of a recommendation to the full BET of a release of this condition for the release of these $8,000. Thank you.
First, before I ask for any other questions or comments, I thought I'd give Mr. Deuce an opportunity to respond to Mr. Raymer's comments, and then we'll come back and ask for additional questions or comments.
Okay, this is Andy Deuce again. Thank you, Jeff. That's always helpful to have your perspective. And let me respond. We've been very careful on the RFP evaluation committee to follow the rules. And we've been closely guided here by both by the purchasing department and also by the legal department. Legal department, particularly with respect to the Freedom of Information Act. And our mandate's been very simple. Review the proposals that we received and shift to them and make a recommendation to the first selectman who sponsored the initial RFP. We have been doing that carefully, deliberately, very slowly over the last, for the balance of for the first 6 months of this year. Part of the process is to respond to some information requests from the potential counterparties. And we have heard from almost all of them that they would expect to see this kind of study. This is a standard study. So this is not being done for sale purposes. It's really being done for disclosure purposes. I consider it to be a disclosure document, nothing more than that. It's not a sale document. Again, going back to our mandate, it's solely to give a recommendation to the first selectman. If we do that, if we do make a recommendation, it's not clear that we will, but if we do make a recommendation, and if the first selectman accepts that, then the process continues. This is not the end of the process. It will have to go through likely the Nathaniel Witherall Board, certainly the RTM, and certainly these other issues will need to be addressed, including the rights of the donors' descendants, which I think you made reference to earlier. It's a process that will be open to broad discourse and review and debate. Again, I would welcome that eventually, but we're just not in a position now to do that. I hope with the completion of the study, and it should not take long, that we would be able to be in a position early fall to make a recommendation. But I make, as I've learned, I'm not going to make any recommendations or predictions on timetable. Let me pause there. I don't know if I answered everything you raised, Jeff, but if I've missed anything, I'm happy to respond.
Ms. Moriarty?
I had a question more on this specific request. When I read the documentation provided, specifically the scope of work proposed by the contractor, it uses words like visual site survey, visual observations, that the survey will be done by either senior level field staff or engineer or architect. So it's not clear reading the document what level of detail and that you'll be getting from this contract. And I'm just asking the question whether the committee or whoever did the request for their proposal has seen a draft report that they've done for another community or another facility, is comfortable that you're going to be getting the information that you need, the level of detail you need. 8,000 is not a lot of money, and the words here seem very superficial.
The name of this consulting firm that does the study is one that we've seen, members of our committee have seen elsewhere. It's not, as you observe, it's not going to be a extremely detailed study. You get what you get for what you pay for. It's only $8,000. This is also a name that was recommended to us by two of the potential counterparties as someone that they would trust to do a study like this. And so for both those reasons, references from the counterparties and also the experience one of our committee members has had with this firm, we decided to go with this firm.
No, I've already spoken to.
So I think I will also ask a question or two. I think Leslie sort of led down the way, Leslie Moriarty led down the way of perhaps my questioning here. First, I will comment to Mr. Raymer that, the way I look at this, this committee, which the first selectman form is similar to a investment advisory committee that would, look at a project and the project their recommendations may or may not be accepted, may or may not be done, but certainly worthwhile expanding horizons, and you learn what you learn. So from that standpoint, I think this is very worthwhile, and we certainly have a talented team on that committee, as I think Mr. Deuce pointed out, has been working now for at least, we'll say at least 7 months based on what he said. So, I look at this as needed additional information for due diligence, and this is sort of a war room type of action that's pretty common in the financial industry, and so I don't really see any deviations from that standpoint. And so from that standpoint, I certainly support this. And will vote for it. But I would caution this committee that this, as Ms. Moriarty said, is very superficial, and we are a government agency with an amazing Nathaniel Witherall, which I think Mr. Raymer did not use those words, but I will comment on it since I was previously on the board. And so I look at this with an abundance of caution, because this is not necessary. Maybe they're familiar to a couple people there, but not as familiar, and certainly not the quality perhaps that we have had previously work on Nathaniel Witherall. When we did Project Renew, the town did Project Renew, they hired Robert A.M. Stern Architects, RAMSA, to basically lead the due diligence on this project. And well-known at that point, certainly the most renowned in the United States, certainly going global. And Robert Stern, I think, was the chairman of the architecture department at Yale at the time, also in addition to the firm. In addition, they hired out Entech Engineering, which at that point in time was certainly one of the very top global engineering firms to do engineering studies of these 3 separate buildings. And we have to recognize 3 separate buildings from 3 separate times. And they in turn hired Silman Engineering, again, you know, highly renowned, highly respected, doing project on falling waters, Franklin Wright's Falling Waters, which was literally falling into the water at that time, or also the New York Public Library, very complex projects. So very well renowned. I think they're working on the Capitol building. Entech was at the time they were working on this project, US Capitol. So what concerns me here is creating a public record that may differ from the record, may differ from some of the decisions that were made. And I think we should be very cautious as we move ahead with this project. But certainly, I think moving ahead with due diligence, perhaps going back and seeing if we can uncover some of the work was done, if that's needed. I encourage this group to move ahead and work as a team. And I think that's always good. And then decisions come at a later date when the information is available. Mr. Deuce.
Andy Deuce, if I can add, one of the members of our evaluation committee is Larry Simon, who serves as chair of the Nathaniel Witherell Board. And he is, although this is to be done for primarily due diligence purposes and disclosure purposes, he would also very much appreciate the results of the study. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion to approve? Do you have any, Roland, do you have some points here? You look like you're ready to say something. Okay. Do we have a motion on this item? Ms. Moriarty.
I'll make a motion to release conditions on $8,000 for additional consulting funds for the Nathaniel Witherell project.
So, Ms. Moriarty, can we call that a recommendation to release conditions, since that's our role? I don't believe we can
Yes.
actually release. I think we
It's a
recommend to the full
recommendation
BET.
to release.
Okay. So is there a second to Ms. Moriarty's motion? Or is it better that I will second this in this case because it's presented by Mr. Deuce? So if that's all right with you?
Okay.
Okay. So the motion was made by Ms. Moriarty. I want to make sure I put all this in the right place. And I have seconded the motion. Tarkington, Mrs. Tarkington seconded the motion. Those in favor, I call it a roll call. Ms. Moriarty.
I'll vote yes.
Ms. Tarkington votes yes. Mr. Deuce.
Andy Deuce votes yes.
Mr. Raymer. Mr. Raymer votes no. So the vote on that for release, for the recommendation of releasing conditions is 3-1-0. Thank you. Okay, so the next item that we have is the town clerk. Approval. Thank you, Ben. Yes, thank you very much. Approval to use. And do we have, there's a COVID grant. Doesn't appear that there's anyone here to present it. Roland, would you like to present this?
Sure. So this is one of 2 grants received by the town clerk's office. And this one in particular was a COVID grant. And what we're doing here is setting up appropriations in our grant fund and moving the expenses from the general fund to the grant fund so that they can end the year without a deficit.
So I'm sorry. Okay, so you have worked with our town clerk and put together the blue short sheet, and you are satisfied with the presentation of this information. And also, by the way, I mean, this has been a difficult year for anyone doing elections in the COVID environment. And I know the town clerk's office has worked a great deal of time, a great deal of overtime, and with no additional help. And I believe that they've done a great job here.
A lot of this is for the additional mailings of the absentee ballots, overtime for the meetings, printing for the absentee ballots, it's,
This is an example of operating in the COVID environment and our departments, like our finance department, Mr. Geiger and Mr. Minarski, our assessors department, also another department that reports to the BUT. But here's another town department that reports to the elected town clerk that I think has done a great job. Mr. Raymer.
One of my curiosity questions again, I'm sorry, Roland. How does this take place? So it must have come to the attention of the town clerk's department that there might be grants available, and they filled out information and submitted it, and after review, the grant was granted. Pardon the English on that. Is that how that came about?
I believe it was. The state just made this available when they decided to change election laws during the COVID.
Right.
And every town got money to help them out during the elections.
But these are not dollars that were available to the town and somebody's decided to put it in the hands of the town clerk. This was a grant application made by the town clerk for the operation of her
Yes,
department.
this went specifically to the town clerk.
Thank you.
You need, Karen,
It would be great if it's on the record. If you'd come, there's a microphone here, that would do it for you. We'd love to have you with us. Come up this way. Come up this way. Oh, you want to go to the lectern? Okay. Anywhere you
this
want.
is fine, Karen. This, and not only that, Ms. Fasciolatus, you get to be on the camera down there. It's difficult to.
And I break the chair.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Well, that's more the fault of the chair, I would say.
Now don't lean back.
There have been some grants that were through the Secretary of the State's office and through various entities, if you will, for voting purposes. And I know that both the registrar of voters and the town clerk have applied for them, and they have been granted to them. So this is one example of that.
Thank you,
Great.
Karen.
Thank you for the additional information, Karen. Okay, do we have Ms. Moriarty?
I just want to make one point that looking at the paperwork, it's not 100% clear that it relates to fiscal year 21 and not fiscal year 22 because it's July. In that explanos, it does talk about when the expenses occurred in 21. I just want to make sure that for our records that we've got it's clear of what fiscal year we're referring to since we're approving it in the next fiscal year.
Ms. Moriarty does say here, though, for elections during 2020, 2021, but you're saying it might go into the fiscal year 22?
I'm saying someone looking at the date on the top saying July, wondering whether it's applying, this application applies to fiscal 21 or fiscal 22.
So you think it should say year-end adjustment someplace? Fiscal
I
year-end
think the
adjustment or
wording
something like
can
that?
be, the word, yes, it can be. I think we should add a little bit on the wording
So
to
maybe we,
refer to making the adjustment in fiscal year 21.
Roland, does that sound reasonable if you make an adjustment to this blue sheet saying just fiscal year-end, or is that correct? Would that be correct or not?
I
It's
think the
fiscal
blue
20.
sheet's pretty clear. It says for additional expenses for elections during 2021.
I brought that point up, but Leslie wasn't.
Okay.
What would you say?
All right, I will withdraw my, my comment. I just, so that's fine. As it goes to the full BET, it'll read this way. We'll see if anyone else has the same concern.
Well, Roland, I think you could just make sure that it's clear, if it is correct, that it's a year-end adjustment for fiscal year 21. So do I have a motion to approve the use of the COVID grant for the town clerk's office?
Andy Deuce moves that we accept it.
The motion from Andy Deuce to accept this grant. Are you moving that this be routine?
Yes, this should be a routine.
And Leslie Moriarty will second.
And Leslie Moriarty seconds Mr. Deuce's motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
So that motion is approved 4-0-0, and we won't take a roll call vote. So now we are back to our capital carry forward capital requests, and those are all in the Board of Education. So once again, we'll hear from Sean O'Keefe, Mr. O'Keefe, our Chief Operations Officer for the Board of Education. Welcome back, Sean.
Thank you very much. So Leslie, as you mentioned, these are continuing force requests for capital. I'll take one by one. ED1 is $156,000 for restroom renovations at North Miamis. And as you can imagine, with the collapse, this work was put off so that we can keep the repairs on track. So this work will be done next summer. But do you want to do this one by one or?
No, Sean, I would like to do these one by one.
Okay.
Mr. Deuce, did you have a question about the project being pushed out to the summer of 22? So we're talking about fiscal year 23?
Perhaps it's this is Andy Deuce. So perhaps it's a small point, Sean, but I saw in the text that the work would not be done until the summer of 2022. Maybe it's a small point, but that's not this fiscal year.
Yeah, given that we're operating, we're doing the repairs. Theoretically, if all goes well, we should have the school back, December, January timeframe, but it probably would have to be done in the summer so as not to disrupt the students. So I think realistically, that's what we're looking at, summer of 22, which you're correct would be full year 23.
But if you had the opportunity, you could do it later this fiscal year, is what I'm hearing.
If we could do it, we could do it sooner, absolutely. But I'll have to check with Dan if that's even feasible. But he did specifically mention to me that it would be most likely in the summer, so as not to disrupt.
Okay.
Do I have any other questions? Any further questions, Andy?
No.
Do I have a motion?
Ms. Leslie Moriarty, can we vote on all 5 with one motion?
No, we just decided to do them
Do
individually.
one individually?
So is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Leslie Moriarty, motion to approve.
Jeff,
Andy Deuce.
Andy Deuce,
Andy Deuce, motion to
seconds.
second. Those in favor? Okay, that's
Aye.
voted 4-0-0, unanimous. ED2, Sean.
ED2 or 15,000 for fences. Fences we typically deal with on a case-by-case basis. So when damage occurs, the work will get done. So we would like to keep that for next year.
Okay, any questions about this? Motions?
Yes.
Mr. Raymer just moved to,
Oh, okay, Mr.
And-
Raymer just moved.
and
Mickey and
Miss, we already gone past that. And so those in favor, Mr. Deuce seconded? Okay,
Yes.
those in favor, 4-0-0. Okay, ED3.
ED3 is 149,000 for abatement, and similarly with fences, it's work that is ongoing. So we would like to continue those funds to continue our abatement process.
But none of these projects have started, correct?
Right. So these funds specifically would be used for Havemeyer and Eastern Middle School in full year 22.
Thank you.
Do we ever get to a point that there's nothing left to abate?
I don't think so. We'll make more.
Okay, so.
This is Leslie Moriarty. I just wanted to comment that the rest of these are all delayed, partly due to COVID restrictions and access to the building.
That is true. That is true.
Well, this one
This one and the next 2.
is, so you
Well,
think
anyway, I
ED3
just-
is all interior rather than exterior?
I'm saying it's both. It was partly delayed due to COVID, but it was, as Sean did mention, it was part of his explanation, and I just wanted to give another
No, that
rationale.
is true. Part of the
Yeah.
reason is limited access. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll move it.
Leslie Moriarty moved,
Jeff Raymer.
Jeff
seconds.
Raymer second. Those in favor, aye, 4-0-0. No vote. Okay, ED4,
And
Sean.
that's routine.
And these are, so far, they're all routine, right?
Okay. ED4 is 130,000 for emergency lighting. So we did manage to get some of the work done with prior year funding. We also, as Leslie Moriarty mentioned, that there was limited access to buildings. That's another contributing factor. And one project in Riverside, we placed on hold due to we have to wait for an emergency stairway repair to be completed.
Questions?
None. Leslie, want to
Motions?
make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Leslie Moriarty made the
approve?
Andy
motion.
Hughes, seconds.
Andy, you second. Those in favor?
Aye.
400.
Routine.
It's routine, right? Routine, right? Okay, Board of Education, ED5, Sean.
ED5 ending on a high note. These funds were requested in error. Funds will be returned with a closeout form to be submitted. I knew Leslie would like that.
So this was submitted in error, so there is no ED5.
There are no underground tanks to remove.
So is this a prior appropriation? Is that?
Yes.
And so actually, it wasn't submitted in error. It's a reduction in a prior appropriation and return of the funds.
Well, we don't normally do that, Jeff, so normally you wouldn't have the form. So this is great news. So that's $110,000 is coming back to us, and there'll be another form to look at in September. So good thing we didn't approve all 5 of them at one time. So Roland, question, does this become a vacant number, ED5, since it was really submitted in error, or do we use it again, or just keep on the series so that we go to ED8 the next time? Okay, I just didn't know. Thank you, Sean, and thank you for doing this. I guess this is the time to point out that, you know, it's not only in the Board of Education that we've had the impact of COVID on the capital projects, but it's also the town. And so when I asked Roland just before fiscal year end, what we had in town projects, you know, being the BOE and the town encumbered and available budgets, the number was $96 million. And we've just added with the beginning of the fiscal year, $66 million. I tried to get Roland to do another update on these sheets, but he told me I couldn't do that until the 19th of July. So anyway, it's, but I will point out that that totals $162 million of approved capital projects with available budgets. And of that number, approximately 101, I think, is in the town. And something like, I don't know what it is now, 61, I guess, is in the Board of Education. So, you know, there's a lot to be done here. You know, we've approved a lot, and a lot of this delay is really due to everyone operating in this COVID environment. And quite frankly, it's absolutely amazing how well, you know, all of that has occurred. So, you know, thank you, Sean. Schools were open throughout the year. Thank you to the superintendent and the whole staff. And of course, always thank you to Roland and Pete. Okay, so Sean, thank you. And I don't think we need to see you next week, maybe.
Nope.
Okay.
Call anytime. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Have a good afternoon. Okay, the next thing, Roland, we have our economic conditions report, and we have a one-pager this time, and it's been updated. And you want to run through just summary of the revenues and summary of the expenses as we look at ending our fiscal year and advising us how much fund balance we used also to make this work. We have a one-page sheet from you, Roland.
Is it going to be shared on the screen? Can we do that?
Well, I don't think we need to put it on the screen.
No?
Roland can just, we don't normally do the Roland can just,
Okay. It's just
Roland
it's
can
not
just
in the
summarize.
packet, but okay.
Roland can just summarize. Well, it was sent to all the BET members last week, Leslie.
The question is the public. I mean, as you say, we don't normally, with this economic conditions report, we don't normally have that on screen. We don't normally send that out to the public. Is it posted on the website?
What the,
This report, is it posted?
it is posted now, yes, but
Okay.
it wasn't
So
posted.
if somebody in the public
on-
wanted to see it, they could find it on the website. Okay,
I mean,
okay.
look, I don't guarantee anything, but
No,
I'm happy to go back.
No,
And
no,
if it
it's
hasn't
fine.
been posted,
No, no,
we
it's
will make
fine.
sure, but we believe
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
posted in the package.
Okay, well,
right,
if it
Joe?
hasn't been, let's post it.
But I
and then-
believe it is in the package,
Okay,
correct?
good.
Roland, do you want to just give us a summary?
Well, it was good news on both the revenues and the expenses. The revenues are $9.5 million over budget. And the budget included almost $9 million of items that we reclassed into expenses to offset expenses. So if you start at the top, you look at the taxes and the interest, $5.2 million. Prior year was almost $2.3 million over. And Pete and I were talking about that. We're wondering if it's a combination, just a lot of sales. And people were obviously selling their homes and paying the taxes in arrears. So
We also have to give credit to our tax collector who has, I think, really been working this year and been working with the team. We got to give some credit to Mr. Raymer,
I
who
would
is,
say
you know,
some- I would
cracks
say
his
some-
whip.
Some credit needs to go to the liaisons who have been working closely with the tax collector on dealing with tax arrearages and unpaid sums.
But anyway, so, you know, I think some credit goes there. And I think also the point you've raised, Roland, that people do pay their property taxes, you know, when they make transfers, especially if they're somewhat in arrears. And then also, whatever. Anyway, I think that all is helped in today's environment.
And then, of course, the three that we always watch, conveyance, building permits, and interest, we've followed how they're doing all year long, and it's just amazing. I mean, over $10 million for conveyance tax.
Yeah.
That's more than double what the budget was.
Yeah.
The other areas that were favorable were the monies from the state for the Board of Ed, and then the state and federal grants, which are the bridges.
So this is good, right?
What
But
is-
also it's a change in accounting too, right? Because the way they were budgeted, the
Oh, that's,
It's
employee.
a negative.
it's a net zero.
No, it's not a net zero. It
The
actually
negative.
made revenues were $9 million lower.
Right.
Yeah, but it picks up on the expense side when you put the revenues together with the
Right,
expenses. Then that's
Right,
zero.
but if we're just looking at the revenues over budget,
Oh.
we exceeded not just by 9 million, but we really exceeded by 18, really, because we didn't have that 9 million budgeted.
Okay.
Right. I mean, this is just amazing. Again, I credit our town employees who kept everything operating. The town hall has been open throughout the time, as Roland and Pete can confirm, since they were in the office like every single day. And then also, you know, capital projects have continued and are, it's amazing what's been accomplished in an environment which was very difficult to. So this is good news, and this is a good way to go into fiscal year 22, Roland?
And the bottom line right now is we're looking at an increase in fund balance of $8.7 million.
So that's
Is
great.
that a record?
I don't know.
It's
It's,
certainly higher than we were used to in the recent past.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Roland, or one of you who has better recollection than I, to refresh my recollection, if you would, and my thing is on. What do we budgeted for the upcoming year on the SPED grants, the educational cost sharing, and the state and federal grants? I mean, a little more than $2.5 million worth of this bonanza is the fact that in the year just finished, we budgeted an expectation of very, very little money in those categories. And we've budgeted, as I recall, more. I don't know if we've been quite realistic yet, but more.
I think we budgeted almost $3 million.
I could answer that. Peter Menarski speaking.
Yes, thank you.
I have the budget book in front. We budgeted 900,000 for SPED for the audience, the special education reimbursements. We budgeted for the education cost sharing 378,649, which is a specific number that we know because we get it from the governor. The total in total, we budgeted 2,574,000. A couple of other monies are LoCIP, Local Capital Improvement Plan, and the pilot payment in lieu of taxes for the hospital. So to answer your question, the total is 2,574,000 for the current year, 21-22. It's an increase of 2,542,000. Last year, we only budgeted 32,538, and it's so noted in the report where you can see that we picked up a lot of money from LoCIP, LotCIP, and the bridges.
Thank you, Pete.
Can I also add to this when we're done with the general fund, Madam Chair?
Of course. Well, what if Roland is, Roland, are you ready to
Okay,
speak? Okay, please.
The expenses. Roland hasn't gone through yet.
Oh, Roland hasn't gone through the expenses. Pete, can we come back to you or do you want to talk about?
No,
revenues?
when we're done with this report.
Roland, I think your microphone is not on.
And the expenses, we did quite well. Just lower spending in a lot of places, particularly in the general fund and public works. Same thing with police. Because of COVID, nobody was traveling. There was no backfilling of overtime. So we saved quite a bit of money there. And then the fixed charges, that's where that $9 million of revenue reduced the expenses.
If I can ask a question. I wanted to ask, this is Leslie Moriarty, the fire department, and I guess, fire department that's showing up as a negative here. We did approve some transfers now,
Well,
but
the reason that's negative and external entities is negative. When I do this comparison of actual to budget, I use the original budget. During the year, we had interim appropriations for the fire department and for TAG, if you remember.
right.
So if I would use the revised budget, then I'd have to remember that we took this out of fund balance and adjust for that. So this way, it's just against the original budget.
Okay, thank you.
External entities.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Mr. Raymond, if you could just make sure your
Yes,
microphone's on.
Yeah, the external entities, where was that again?
We
TAG.
Was that
give
all
TAG an
TAG?
interim appropriation.
So without TAG, that would have been a positive. The external entities.
Yes.
Thank you.
Roland, do you have any further comments? Pete, Mr. Menarski?
I didn't want to move on without the good news to report from the retirement fund. We got the June 30th preliminary numbers. When I say preliminary, they don't include the trailing private equity. We ended the year at $613 million. That's an increase of $120 million over June 30th of a year before in 2020. That's great news for a couple of reasons. One is you recall that we entertained doing a pension obligation bond, and we were going to borrow $90 million. The funding went positive for about $120 million, which increases the funding ratio, which decreases the unfunded liability. Also, it has the ability to offset an anticipated drop in the discount rate, which is also known as the assumed rate of return from 6.25 to 6. So it'll offset that intended proposed drop for the retirement board. Will have a good impact on the budget for the year 22-23. So aside from the general fund, the retirement fund was excellent.
So Pete, that's an increase in excess of 20%. Is that correct? Am I doing this right? You said.
Correct.
six-
Well,
In ex-
20, yes, 20% of 500 million would be 100 million. It's 120 million. So it's a little over 20%.
23% or something like that? So wow, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, now that's a simple way of looking at it, but the returns were actually in the high 20s, blended in, all of them, because you've got to factor in that we have around $36 million of expenses that also came out of the fund. So we had the ADEC, the annually determined employer contribution of 26 million went in. We paid out 36. So we had that 120 increase is in excess of a $10 million excess payout. But the return, two things is it was in the high 20s. And number two is don't forget we smooth. So we get the ability to take that surplus of 120 plus and peel it off over the next 4 years. That's how smoothing works.
Thank you, Pete, for the additional information, and thank you for the good news. As a member of the retirement board, I congratulate you. It's always good to have good things happen. It's, especially in such a difficult year. I want to come back to this, the economic conditions report, though, because some of the items that made it so successful this year may also reverse in, the upcoming year or as we move towards fiscal 23 and think about the budget guidelines for that. So we have to be cognizant of that. Any more questions on this item? Economic?
Yes, just one question to Mr. Menarski's contribution. Any prospect that the remarkable return over the past year may dissuade the retirement board from a reduction to 6.25% to 6% flat on the 5-year smoothing rate?
It's I don't like speaking for others, but I'll repeat a conversation I had with the proposed new chair. We don't know. As you all know, Joseph Pellegrino, his term ended June 30th, the chairman of the retirement board. Pamela Fredericks from the RTM previously was sworn in on Monday, and she'll be attending her first meeting in July. To Mr. Raymer's question, this was a 2-year plan voted on a year ago by the retirement board. And actually, my conversation with Mr. Wasik, who probably will be the new chair, is that this is in his mind all the more reason to drop it to 6% because it should have a neutral impact on the annual contribution in the next fiscal year. I'm not sure I totally accept the logic, but to answer your question, the short answer is no, they're going to go to 6%. They would only have one dissenting vote, but we're going to go to 6.0.
I'm grateful for that dissenting vote.
Okay, so Mr. Deuce has a question?
Yes, Andy Deuce. If I could perhaps expand upon Pete's answer. One reason why they may want to take the discount rate down 25 basis points is because it's more fully funded, and they want to de-risk the pension portfolio. And you do that by getting out of some higher risk assets and replacing with lower risk assets, and therefore you bring down the assumed return. And that's always a challenge as you get your funded ratio at higher rates that you would go to a less risky investment portfolio. By the way, from the perspective of early disclosure, I serve with 3 other of our BET colleagues on the special task force looking at the pension liability. And there'll probably be a report at the BET meeting on progress this next week, and a written report submitted, I guess, prior to the September meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to our next new business item. This is just the, it isn't just, this is the 2021 tree plantings report. It's required under budget resolution number 49. It's just one of those things that slipped through that didn't appear during our budget cycle. I saw Dr. Kramer, our tree warden, and I reminded him of this. He wasn't in town hall, he did it, and so I want to publicly thank him for submitting the report without any reminders. And this is just in here for informational purposes, unless anyone wants to discuss it. I will make a comment, though, that when I went back to look at this, when I was reading the budget resolutions, sort of trying to wrap up fiscal year 21, I did notice that there's a discrepancy between this budget resolution 49 and budget resolution 50, both of which are tree plantings. One is the tree conservancy, one is the, I think it's Greenwich Point, and both relate to trees. In the case of this one, the tree conservancy or whatever this is, there's no require to appropriate. And I will say that, you know, Ms. Moriarty and I have that experience that we did, MISA provide a check to the Parks and Rec Department. And as a result of no appropriations, no real record as such, people keep thinking that MISA didn't plant the trees. Instead, we paid for the trees. And I do think that this is something that perhaps looking ahead to fiscal year 23 budget, the law committee, when it reviews resolutions, should be thinking about whether these two should be consistent with one another, whichever way they go. But this was only informational, the tree plantings report. Andy Deuce, Mr. Deuce.
Andy Deuce, a question. I recognize that Dr. Kramer is not present, but I'm curious if my colleagues might know the answer. What the column labeled Laurenti, what does that mean on the report?
I believe that's the third-party landscape firm.
That's the contractor. Those are the contractors put the trees in.
Okay. Okay, thank you. By the way, while I have the mic, if I could add, I've been very impressed by the good work that Dr. Kramer has done with the trees. It's been most impressive, and this list here is impressive as by itself. He's doing a very good job. Thank you.
Well, anyway, he was very responsive, and that's always nice. And we thank Dr. Kramer very much. Moving on to BET Budget Committee meeting minutes. Are there any motions to approve?
So this is Leslie Moriarty. I will make a motion. Well, let me ask one question first. There were some changes from the original posting of the budget committee packet to I think the final one, which had some changes to the minutes. Am I correct that?
They were all, as far as I know, all your changes were accepted. I mean, I think in one case we dropped a "the" and we made a capital letter for the next letter or something, but essentially all your changes, as far as I know, were included, and all of those changes were reported as the R and sent to Shira.
Okay, I appreciate everyone's patience with last minute changes. So I'll make a motion and to approve all 5 sets of minutes, the June 8th meeting, March 1st, February 25th, February 23, and February 12.
Is there a second?
Andy Deuce seconds that motion.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at 4-0-0, that motion passed unanimously.
And so we have 3 sets of minutes still outstanding from the budget meetings?
One almost went to you last night.
Oh, I would not have looked at them. But okay, so we have 3 more days and then we are done and we roll
We're
into the
almost
next one. Okay, thank you.
Well, we'd like to get those done. We had hoped to get them done by now, but no. Some of them have been out for a while though, hadn't they? Okay, so we will get those done. I just wanted to comment once again on our next meeting. It's scheduled for Tuesday, September 14th at 1 p.m. But if there is a primary, those room, this room, cone room, et cetera, will be used. And so this committee has agreed that if there is a primary on the 14th, we will meet on Wednesday, September 15th at 1 PM, and we should know on August 11, whether any petitions have been submitted for a primary. So certainly we'll all be attuned to that. And I think this committee is all holding the dates, Roland and Pete, so forth. So, shall we, a motion to adjourn? Or is there
I'll make a
something
motion
else?
to adjourn.
Okay, and so it's 2:22. Thank you. Wonderful summer to all.